The silk of her dress barely skimmed her thighs, a crimson warning sign. He cornered her against the mahogany desk, eyes dark with lethal obsession. "Who are you planning to kiss after work in that dress?" he whispered. She was his secretary. He was Chicago's most ruthless boss. Tonight, blood would spill. The penthouse office of Cavallo Holdings sat on the 42nd floor, a sprawling monument of glass, steel, and Italian marble that overlooked the churning grey waters of Lake Michigan. To the oblivious citizens of Chicago, it was a legitimate real estate empire. To the select few who understood the subterranean currents of power in the city, it was the fortress of Dante Cavallo. Dante did not just run the city. He owned its shadows. He was a man of terrifying stillness, possessing a mind like a steel trap and a reputation forged in the blood of rival syndicates. Yet, for all his absolute control over the docks, the unions, and the underground casinos, there was one variable in his meticulously ordered life that he could not entirely manage. Her name was Chloe Bennett. For 3 years, Chloe had been his executive secretary. She was fiercely intelligent, fiercely private, and typically dressed in a uniform of unassuming, tailored grey wool or muted navy pantsuits from Ann Taylor. She knew his schedule, his preferences, and implicitly understood which of his associates required a private elevator and which could wait in the lobby. She was indispensable. And, much to Dante's silent, burning frustration, she was completely immune to him. Or so he thought. It was 4:45 p.m. on a freezing Tuesday in November. Dante stood by the floor-to-ceiling window, the bespoke tailoring of his charcoal Tom Ford suit cutting a sharp silhouette against the fading afternoon light. He was nursing a crystal tumbler of Macallan 25, his mind supposed to be on a multi-million-dollar money-laundering acquisition in the South Loop. Instead, his dark, heavy gaze was fixed on the reflection in the glass. Chloe was still at her desk in the outer office, but she was no longer wearing her standard corporate armor. She had slipped into the private washroom 20 minutes ago and emerged entirely transformed. She was currently organizing a stack of offshore manifests, wearing a vintage St. Laurent cocktail dress. It was a deep, scandalous shade of crimson silk that clung to her curves like a second skin, featuring a plunging neckline and an asymmetrical hem that left entirely too much of her long legs exposed. She had traded her sensible flats for a pair of black Christian Louboutin stilettos, the iconic red soles flashing with every step she took. Her usually pinned-back blonde hair was loose, cascading over her shoulders in soft, deliberate waves. The faint, intoxicating scent of Chanel No. 5 drifted into his office, mocking his legendary self-control. Dante felt a muscle in his jaw feather. A cold, irrational fury began to coil in his chest. She was leaving at 5. She had requested the evening off 3 weeks in advance, citing a personal appointment. Dante had approved it without a second thought, assuming it was a dentist visit or a family obligation. He had not anticipated this. This was not the attire of a woman going to a dental cleaning. This was the attire of a woman going to ruin a man's life. Or, at the very least, his night. Dante set his tumbler down on his massive oak desk with a sharp clack. The sound caused Chloe to look up. Her piercing green eyes met his through the open double doors. She paused, a file folder suspended in her manicured hands. He didn't call for her. He simply stared. The predatory intensity in his gaze, making the air in the room suddenly feel too thin to breathe. He watched her swallow hard, a faint flush creeping up her elegant neck. Slowly, she stood, smoothing the front of the crimson silk with a nervous flutter of her hands, and walked into his office. "Is there something you need before I leave, Mr. Cavallo?" Chloe asked. Her voice was steady, perfectly modulated, but he could see the slight tremor in her fingers. Dante didn't answer immediately. He closed the distance between them with slow, deliberate steps, the silence in the room stretching until it felt suffocating. He stopped mere inches from her. She had to tilt her head back to maintain eye contact. Up close, the dress was even more devastating. The silk seemed to pulse with her heartbeat. He reached out, his large, calloused hand brushing against the edge of her desk, effectively trapping her between his imposing frame and the heavy mahogany furniture. "You requested this evening off," Dante said, his voice a low, gravelly baritone that vibrated with dangerous authority. "I did," Chloe replied, refusing to back down, though her breath hitched. 3 weeks ago. All your meetings for tomorrow are prepped. The European transfers are authorized." Dante leaned in, his gaze dropping to her mouth, which had been painted a dark, alluring berry shade. The scent of her perfume was maddening. The jealousy that had been simmering in his veins suddenly boiled over, completely overriding his usual stoic composure. "Who are you planning to kiss after work in that dress?" the jealous Mafia boss asked his secretary, the words tearing from his throat before he could stop them. Chloe gasped softly, her eyes widening in genuine shock. Dante was a man of icy professionalism. He had never crossed the line. He had never hinted at the dark, possessive thoughts that plagued him whenever another man even looked in her direction. "Mr. Cavallo Dante," she stammered, the use of his first name slipping out in her panic. "I don't think my personal life is a matter for the office. It becomes a matter for the office when you show up to my headquarters looking like a weapon," Dante countered, his voice dropping to a lethal whisper. His thumb brushed the bare skin of her shoulder, feeling the heat radiating from her. "Cancel it. Excuse me? Whatever date you have. Whoever the man is, cancel it," Dante ordered, the mob boss bleeding through the corporate facade. "Tell him you're working late." Chloe's expression shifted. The shock melted into something else, something akin to desperation. "I can't. You don't understand. It's incredibly important." "More important than your job?" "Yes," she whispered, her voice cracking slightly. "Yes, it is." That single word felt like a physical blow to his chest. She was willing to risk her career, a career she had guarded fiercely for the man waiting for her. Dante's eyes darkened to the color of obsidian. He stepped back, the sudden removal of his presence leaving the air between them frigid. "You have until exactly 5 o'clock, Dante said coldly, turning his back to her and walking toward the window. "Enjoy your evening, Miss Bennett." Chloe didn't say another word. She turned on her heel and practically fled the office. Dante stood by the window, watching the street below. 10 minutes later, he saw her emerge from the building, a sleek black trench coat draped over the red dress. She didn't head toward the train station. Instead, she hailed a yellow cab, glancing nervously over her shoulder, before sliding into the back seat. Dante pulled his encrypted phone from his breast pocket. He pressed a single button. "Leo," Dante commanded, when his second-in-command answered. "Bring the Aston Martin around to the private garage. Now, we have a rat to catch." He wasn't just going to fire the man who was taking her out. He was going to erase him from the face of the earth. The yellow cab smelled of stale smoke and pine air freshener, but Chloe barely noticed. Her heart was hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. She checked her reflection in the darkened window, pulling the collar of her trench coat tighter around her neck. Dante's confrontation had nearly shattered her nerve. For 3 years, she had navigated the treacherous waters of Cavallo Holdings by remaining utterly unremarkable, a ghost in the machine of his empire. She knew exactly what Dante Cavallo was. She had seen the coded ledgers. She had noticed the men with broken noses and concealed firearms who visited the service elevators after midnight. She knew he was a monster, but until tonight, he had never turned that monstrous intensity toward her. "Who are you planning to kiss?" The memory of his voice sent a shiver down her spine, a confusing mix of terror and a dark, forbidden thrill. But she had to push Dante out of her mind. She wasn't going on a date. She was walking into a nightmare. "Pull over here, please," Chloe told the driver, handing him a $50 bill through the partition. "Keep the change." She stepped out onto the damp pavement of uptown Chicago. The wind whipped her blonde hair around her face. Above her, the neon marquee of the Green Mill Cocktail Lounge flickered in the dusk. It was a historic jazz club, a relic from the Al Capone era, known for its strong drinks, dim lighting, and absolute discretion. Chloe checked her watch. 5:30 p.m. She was precisely on time. She pushed through the heavy wooden doors. The blast of warm air, carrying the mournful wail of a saxophone, and the low murmur of secretive conversations. She kept her head down, weaving through the crowded tables until she reached the very back of the lounge, near the emergency exit. A man was waiting in a semicircular leather booth. He was in his late 40s, wearing a cheap, off-the-rack brown suit. He had a weary, pockmarked face and eyes that shifted constantly, cataloguing every exit and every patron. Detective Ethan Cole, Chicago Police Department, Vice Squad, and currently, the man holding her brother's life in his hands. "You're late," Cole grunted as Chloe slid into the booth opposite him. He didn't look at her face. His eyes immediately dropped to the exposed cleavage of the red dress when she loosened her coat. He offered a sleazy, nicotine-stained smile. "Dressed to impress? I see. Your boss make you wear that? Don't flatter yourself, Ethan," Chloe snapped, her voice trembling slightly despite her best efforts to sound tough. She hated the dress. She had bought it specifically because Cole had implied, during their last phone call, that he preferred his informants to look approachable when they met in public. It made her feel sick. "Do you have the file?" Cole took a slow sip of his whiskey. "I have the file. The question is, do you have the flash drive?" Chloe's brother, Liam, was an idiot. 2 weeks ago, he had gotten caught up in an illegal high-stakes poker game run by the O'Connor Syndicate. The game was raided by Cole's unit. Instead of arresting Liam, Cole had found out where Chloe worked. He offered a dirty trade. He would lose Liam's arrest report and the felony drug possession charges he had conveniently found in Liam's pockets, in exchange for a copy of Dante Cavallo's offshore routing numbers. Chloe knew that betraying Dante was a death sentence. But letting her brother go to a maximum security prison, where the Cavallo family, or the O'Connors, could reach him anyway, was also a death sentence. She had spent the last 3 days discreetly copying encrypted files onto a hidden USB drive. She reached into her designer clutch and pulled out a small, silver thumb drive. She kept her hand firmly over it on the table. "Give me the police report first," Chloe demanded. "All the copies," Cole chuckled, a wet, unpleasant sound. "You're in no position to negotiate, sweetheart. Slide it over." Outside, parked across the street in an alleyway, Dante Cavallo sat in the driver's seat of his black Aston Martin DBS. The engine hummed with lethal power. In the passenger seat, his enforcer, Leo, a massive man with scars crisscrossing his throat, was adjusting the optic sight on a suppressed Heckler & Koch USP tactical pistol. "You want me to go in, boss?" Leo asked, his voice a low rasp. Dante didn't answer. He was staring through a pair of high-powered, military-grade binoculars, focused dead on the window of the Green Mill. He could see Chloe in the back booth. He could see the man sitting across from her. When Dante had first seen the man, his jealousy had flared. But as he watched their body language, the romantic illusion shattered instantly, replaced by the cold, calculating instincts of a mob boss. Chloe wasn't leaning in. She was rigid, her shoulders tense, her face pale. The man wasn't looking at her with affection. He was looking at her like a predator cornering a rabbit. Dante adjusted the focus on the binoculars. The neon light outside illuminated the man's face for a fraction of a second. Dante's blood ran ice cold. He knew that face. Ethan Cole, a dirty vice cop who had been trying to shake down Dante's low-level street dealers for protection money for the last 6 months. Son of a bitch, Dante hissed, lowering the binoculars. The realization hit him like a freight train. Chloe wasn't on a date. She was being blackmailed. The crimson dress, the nervous trembling, the desperation in her eyes, it wasn't for a lover. It was a desperate attempt to play a dangerous game with a corrupt cop, and she had done it right under Dante's nose. "Boss?" Leo prompted, sensing the sudden, volatile shift in Dante's aura. The jealousy was gone, entirely replaced by a terrifying, protective rage. "Put the gun away, Leo," Dante said, his voice deadly calm. He popped the door of the Aston Martin. "This one is personal. I'm going in." Back inside the lounge, Chloe's grip on the flash drive tightened. "I'm not stupid, Ethan. I know you. I give you this, and you'll just keep blackmailing me. I want proof my brother is clear." Cole's sleazy smile vanished. He leaned across the table, his hand suddenly shooting out and gripping Chloe's wrist with brutal force. She gasped in pain, trying to pull away, but his grip was like an iron vice. "Listen to me, you stupid little secretary." Cole snarled, dropping his voice so the surrounding tables wouldn't hear. "You don't dictate terms to me. You slide that drive over, or tomorrow morning, your brother gets transferred to Stateville. And I make sure the Aryan Brotherhood knows exactly who he is. Now, give it to—" Cole's words were abruptly cut off. A large, elegantly manicured hand clamped down on the back of the detective's neck, the fingers digging into the nerve clusters with such sudden, excruciating pressure that Cole let out a choked, strangled gasp. His grip on Chloe's wrist instantly went slack as his hands flew up to claw at the vice crushing his spine. Chloe looked up, her heart stopping completely. Dante Cavallo stood over the booth. The ambient light of the jazz club seemed to physically dim around him. He looked like the devil incarnate, tailored in Tom Ford, his eyes completely devoid of mercy. "I believe," Dante said, his voice a smooth velvet blade, slicing through the jazz music. "The lady asked you to let go of her." Ethan Cole's pockmarked face drained of all color. The stale smell of whiskey on his breath hitched in his throat as his bloodshot eyes darted up, meeting the icy, obsidian gaze of Dante Cavallo. Every corrupt cop in Chicago knew the face of the Cavallo Syndicate's boss, but very few had ever been close enough to feel the physical chill that seemed to radiate from him. "Mr. Cavallo," Cole choked out, his hands trembling as he tried and failed to pry Dante's iron fingers from his neck. "This is a misunderstanding. Official police business. Is that so?" Dante murmured, his voice softer than the jazz saxophone wailing from the stage, yet it carried a lethal weight that made the hairs on Chloe's arms stand up. Dante didn't raise his voice. He didn't draw a weapon. He merely leaned down, his lips brushing the shell of Cole's ear. "Because it looks to me like a 2-bit shakedown by a dead man." Chloe sat frozen, her chest heaving against the tight confines of the crimson silk dress. She had expected Dante to erupt, to order his men to drag her out by her hair for attempting to sell his secrets. Instead, he was standing between her and the threat, a dark shield of bespoke wool and terrifying violence. With his free hand, Dante casually reached across the table. He picked up the manila folder containing Liam's arrest report, tucking it neatly under his arm. Then, his long fingers closed over the silver USB drive Chloe had placed on the table. He didn't pocket it. With a sharp, terrifyingly simple motion of his thumb and forefinger, Dante snapped the metal drive in half. The tiny crunch echoed like a gunshot in Chloe's ears. He let the broken pieces fall into Cole's half-empty glass of whiskey. "You have a gambling problem, Detective Cole," Dante whispered, the grip on the man's neck tightening until a localized pop sounded from the cop's cervical spine. Cole let out a pathetic whimper. "You owe $50,000 to the O'Connor boys. I bought that debt at 4 o'clock this afternoon. Which means, Ethan, you belong to me." Cole's eyes rolled back slightly in terror. If you ever speak to Miss Bennet again, Dante continued, his tone conversational and utterly devoid of mercy, if you ever look in her direction, if her name even crosses your mind while you sit in your pathetic, mold-infested precinct, I will have Leo peel you like a bloody grape and leave you in the trunk of a patrol car outside the Cook County Courthouse. Do we have an understanding? Cole gave a spastic, desperate nod, tears of sheer panic welling in the corners of his eyes. Dante released him with a look of profound disgust. Wiping his hand on a pristine linen handkerchief, he pulled from his pocket before dropping the cloth onto the detective's lap. He didn't look at Cole again. Dante's dark, smouldering gaze locked onto Chloe. He extended his hand toward her. "Get up," he commanded. Chloe didn't hesitate. Her legs felt like water, but the sheer force of his authority pulled her upright. She grabbed her trench coat and slipped her hand into his. His grip was warm, rough with calluses, and completely unyielding. He pulled her out of the booth, leading her through the dimly lit maze of the Green Mill Lounge. They stepped out into the biting wind of uptown Chicago. The black Aston Martin DBS was idling by the curb, Leo standing by the passenger door like a gargoyle in a tailored suit. At a nod from Dante, Leo opened the door. Dante guided Chloe into the low-slung leather seat before rounding the hood and sliding into the driver's side. Leo remained on the pavement, pulling out his phone undoubtedly to ensure Cole scurried back to whatever hole he crawled out of. The heavy doors of the Aston Martin sealed shut, plunging the cabin into absolute, terrifying silence. Dante threw the car into drive, the V12 engine roaring to life as he peeled away from the curb, merging onto North Lake Shore Drive. The city lights of Chicago blurred past the tinted windows. Chloe sat rigid in the passenger seat, clutching her coat around the red dress. The silence was suffocating. She knew what happened to people who stole from Dante Cavallo. She had seen the coded ledgers. She knew the bodies buried beneath the new South Side development project. "I can explain," Chloe whispered, her voice cracking in the dark cabin. "Dante, please." "My brother, Liam Bennett." Dante cut her off, his voice flat, his eyes fixed on the taillights ahead of them. 26 years old, 2 priors for petty theft, a mountain of debt and a penchant for underground Texas Hold'em. He got swept up in a vice raid 2 weeks ago. Chloe blinked, stunned. You knew. "I know everything that happens in this city, Chloe," Dante said, his grip on the leather steering wheel white-knuckled. "The O'Connors run a sloppy game. Cole is a sloppy cop. It took my security team exactly 12 minutes to trace the origin of the sudden encrypted downloads on your terminal to a shakedown involving your idiot brother." Tears, hot and humiliated, spilled over Chloe's eyelashes. "I didn't give him anything real. I swear to you. I altered the routing numbers on the drive. It was useless data. I just needed to buy time to get Liam out of the city. I would never betray you." Dante suddenly slammed on the brakes, pulling the Aston Martin violently into an empty, shadowed overlook off the side of the drive. The lake crashed against the concrete barriers just yards away, the sound muffled by the thick glass of the car. He threw the vehicle into park and turned to face her in the confined space. The dashboard lights cast harsh shadows across his sharp jawline. The anger she had expected was there, but it was twisted with something entirely different, something raw, possessive, and desperately dark. "Do you have any idea what I thought when I saw you in my office tonight?" Dante demanded, his voice dropping to a dangerous, vibrating low. He reached out, his knuckles brushing the collar of her coat, pushing it aside to reveal the deep plunge of the crimson silk. "I thought you were dressing up for a lover. I thought some other man was going to put his hands on you. I was fully prepared to murder a complete stranger tonight, just for looking at you." Chloe's breath hitched. Her heart pounded violently against her ribs. Instead, Dante hissed, leaning closer until the scent of his expensive cologne and dark danger entirely surrounded her. I find out you wore this to offer yourself up on a silver platter to a corrupt pig to save a brother who isn't worth the dirt on your shoes. He's my family." Chloe whispered fiercely, a tear tracking down her pale cheek. "He's all I have. I had to protect him. You are mine to protect." The words tore out of Dante with a ferocious intensity that sucked the oxygen from the car. He froze, as if the admission had burned his throat. Chloe stared at him, her lips parted in shock. For 3 years, they had maintained an impenetrable wall of professional detachment. In 4 words, Dante had just demolished it. Dante closed his eyes for a fraction of a second, his jaw working as he reined in the violent possessiveness that had been driving him mad for months. When he opened them, the cold mob boss had returned, but the fire beneath the ice was undeniable. "You don't go to the police. You don't make deals with rats," Dante said, his gaze dropping to her mouth. "You come to me. Do you understand? You bring your problems to me, and what would you have asked for in return?" Chloe challenged, her chin trembling but held high. Dante's eyes darkened. He reached out, his thumb slowly wiping the tear from her cheek, his touch agonizingly gentle compared to the violence he was capable of. "Everything," he whispered. Dante didn't take her back to her small apartment in Wicker Park. He bypassed the city entirely. The Aston Martin devouring the miles of highway, heading north, until they reached the affluent, heavily wooded enclaves of Lake Forest. He turned down a private, unlit road that wound through ancient oak trees, culminating at a massive set of wrought iron gates. Cameras tracked their approach. The gates swung open silently, revealing a sprawling, modern stone fortress set far back from the street, surrounded by acres of manicured, albeit snow-dusted lawns. This was Dante's private sanctuary. No one from the office had ever been here. Chloe remained silent as Dante parked in the subterranean garage, which housed a half-dozen luxury and armored vehicles. He escorted her up a private elevator that opened directly into a vast, open-plan living space. The walls were floor-to-ceiling glass overlooking Lake Michigan, the dark waters churning beneath the moonlight. The interior was aggressively masculine slate, black leather, and brushed steel. Yet a massive stone fireplace crackled with a warm fire, softening the edges of the room. "Sit," Dante commanded, gesturing to a low-slung leather sofa. He didn't wait for her to comply. He walked over to a black marble wet bar, pouring 2 fingers of amber liquid into a crystal tumbler and brought it back to her. "Drink. You're shaking," he ordered. Chloe took the glass with both hands. Her teeth chattered softly against the crystal as she took a burning sip of the scotch. The alcohol hit her stomach like a furnace, slowly melting the icy terror that had gripped her since 5:00 p.m. She slipped off her trench coat, letting it fall onto the leather cushions. Without the coat, she felt dangerously exposed in the crimson dress under the warm, amber lighting of his home. Dante pulled a sleek, encrypted satellite phone from his pocket. He stood by the massive windows, his back to her, and dialed a number. "Vincent," Dante said, his voice entirely devoid of emotion. "The O'Connor game operating out of the warehouse on 18th Street. Shut it down. Tonight." Chloe watched his broad shoulders flex beneath his suit jacket. "Take the ledgers, burn the tables. If Mickey O'Connor gives you a problem, break his legs," Dante instructed smoothly, "and find the marker for a Liam Bennett. Tear it up. As of this moment, the boy's debt belongs to me. He is untouchable." He hung up, slipping the phone back into his pocket, before turning around to face her. "It's done," Dante stated. "Your brother's debt is erased. Cole no longer has any leverage, and by tomorrow morning, he'll be resigning from the force to move to a very quiet, very remote cabin in Wyoming, courtesy of my persuasion. Liam is free." Chloe stared at him, the magnitude of what he had just done washing over her. In less than 2 hours, Dante Cavallo had dismantled a corrupt vice operation and crippled a rival syndicate's racket, all to fix a mess her idiot brother had created. "Why?" she asked. Her voice a fragile whisper. She set the tumbler down on the glass coffee table. "Why would you do all of this?" "I stole from you." Dante began to walk slowly toward her, his movements predatory, measured. He shrugged off his suit jacket, tossing it over a nearby armchair, before pulling the silk tie from his neck and unbuttoning the collar of his crisp white shirt. "Because I am a deeply selfish man, Chloe," Dante said, stopping right in front of her. He looked down at her, his dark eyes tracing the line of her throat, the swell of her chest, above the red silk. "And I protect what is mine. I'm your secretary," she countered, her heart hammering a frantic rhythm. "You haven't been just my secretary for a very long time," Dante murmured. He reached down, his hands gripping her waist. He pulled her to her feet with effortless strength, eliminating the space between them. Chloe gasped, her hands instinctively coming up to rest flat against his chest. She could feel the heavy, rapid thud of his heart beneath the fine cotton of his shirt. He was heat and danger and power, and she was entirely trapped in his orbit. "Every day," Dante rasped, his voice rough with suppressed desire, "I watch you walk into my office. I watch you smile at the doorman. I watch you organize my life with ruthless efficiency. And I sit behind my desk, losing my absolute mind because I cannot touch you. Because I knew if I crossed that line, I would drag you into my darkness." His hands slid up her sides, the friction of his palms against the red silk sending a jolt of electricity straight to her core. His fingers tangled in the soft blonde waves of her hair, tilting her head back. "But then you walk in wearing this," Dante growled, his thumb tracing the fullness of her bottom lip. "And I realize you are perfectly capable of navigating the dark on your own. You lied to my face. You sat across from a dirty cop and tried to play the game. I was terrified," she admitted, her breath mingling with his. "You should be terrified now," Dante warned, though his eyes burned with something entirely different from anger, "because Liam's debt is clear. But yours has just begun. You owe me your life, Chloe, and I intend to collect." Chloe looked up into the face of Chicago's most dangerous man. She saw the ruthlessness that governed the city's underworld, but she also saw a desperate, feral devotion aimed entirely at her. The line between fear and desire completely shattered. She didn't back away. Instead, she let her hands slide up from his chest, her fingers curling into the collar of his shirt. "Then, collect," she whispered. With a low, feral groan, Dante crushed his mouth to hers. There was nothing tentative about the kiss. It was an absolute claiming. It tasted of expensive scotch, dark promises, and pent-up fury. He backed her up until her legs hit the edge of the leather sofa, his body pressing flush against hers, leaving her in no doubt of exactly how much he wanted her. The world of syndicates, ledgers, and blood faded away, consumed entirely by the fire he ignited in her veins. The kiss broke, leaving the massive, fire-lit living room of the Lake Forest estate ringing with a deafening silence. Chloe's chest heaved against Dante's tailored shirt, her lips bruised and parted, her pulse roaring in her ears like a freight train. She looked up into his obsidian eyes and saw the absolute, terrifying permanence of what she had just done. Dante didn't let her step back. His hands slid from her waist, tracing the deep curve of her spine through the thin crimson silk, effectively anchoring her against his hips. The predatory tension in his jaw had smoothed out, replaced by a dark, arrogant satisfaction that chilled her as much as it ignited her. "You don't go back to the outer desk tomorrow," Dante murmured, his thumb brushing a stray blonde curl from her flushed cheek. "You don't fetch my coffee. You don't screen my calls. From tonight onward, you sit inside the glass office." Chloe's breath caught. "Dante, your life in Wicker Park is over," he continued, his tone leaving absolutely zero room for negotiation. My men are already packing your apartment. Your brother will be put on a private flight to London by morning, fully funded, with strict instructions never to return to Illinois. You belong here now. With me, the city will know that Chloe Bennett is entirely untouchable. He was wrapping her in a velvet cage, trading her freedom for a gilded, blood-soaked protection. He expected her to tremble. He expected her to be overwhelmed by the sheer, crushing weight of his absolute control. Instead, a slow, deliberate calmness washed over Chloe. The panicked, desperate secretary vanished, and something entirely different took her place. She reached up, her manicured fingers gently uncurling his grip from her hip. She stepped back, putting 2 feet of space between them. The firelight caught the dangerous gleam in her emerald eyes. "I know," Chloe said smoothly. Dante's brow furrowed, a flicker of genuine confusion breaking his stoic facade. "You know, did you really think I was careless enough to trip your security network by accident, Dante?" she asked, her voice dropping the frantic edge it had held all evening. She walked over to the wet bar, poured herself another inch of his expensive Macallan 25, and turned to face him. "I've managed your encrypted servers for 3 years. I know the exact algorithmic threshold that triggers a silent alarm to your personal device. I bypassed 5 different firewalls to make sure the download pinged directly to you." Dante stood completely still. The silence in the room suddenly felt heavy, charged with a lethal electricity. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying I knew Ethan Cole was out of my league," Chloe confessed, taking a slow sip of the amber liquid. "I knew the moment Liam got arrested that a corrupt vice cop and the O'Connor syndicate would chew me up and spit me out. I had no money, no muscle, and no leverage." She paused, her gaze locking onto his. "But I had you." Dante's eyes narrowed into dark, dangerous slits. "You used me. I manipulated a predictable variable," she corrected, stepping back into his personal space, holding her ground against the sudden, terrifying drop in the room's temperature. "I knew how you looked at me. I knew the jealousy you hid behind your expensive suits and cold stares. So, I bought a red Saint Laurent dress, made sure you saw it, and downloaded just enough dummy data to force your hand. I needed Chicago's biggest monster to scare away the smaller ones. For a long, agonizing minute, Dante did nothing. He stared down at the woman he thought he had just conquered, only to realize she had been holding the reins the entire time. She had weaponized his own obsession against him to save her bloodline. Slowly, the tension in Dante's broad shoulders broke. A low, dark sound rumbled in his chest, a genuine, wicked laugh that echoed through the empty fortress. It was a terrifying sound, completely devoid of warmth, but filled with profound, intoxicating admiration. 3 years, Dante whispered, reaching out to grip her chin, tilting her face up to his. His eyes burned with a ferocious, brilliant fire. 3 years I thought you were a civilian playing in the corporate shallows. And all this time, you were a shark. Are you angry? She challenged softly. Angry? Dante pulled her flush against his chest, his grip possessing and entirely inescapable. I have never been more thoroughly ruined. You played a dangerous game, Chloe. If it had been anyone else, they would be at the bottom of the lake by now. But I'm not anyone else. No, Dante agreed, his lips hovering mere millimeters from hers. You are exactly what I need, a queen who understands the darkness. He claimed her mouth again, and this time, Chloe kissed him back, not as a desperate captive, but as an equal partner in his empire. Outside, the freezing winds of Chicago howled against the reinforced glass, but inside, the city's new power dynamic had just been permanently sealed in blood, silk, and scotch. And that concludes the thrilling tale of Dante and Chloe. If this dark, twisted romance kept you on the edge of your seat, smash that like button and share this video with your fellow drama lovers. Subscribe to our channel and ring the bell so you never miss another dramatic original story. What do you think Chloe will do next as the new Queen of Chicago? Let us know in the comments.